Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sunset TV. I'm Tina Jha, you're watching Perspective. Liz Truss has been named leader of the governing Conservative Party and Britain's next Prime Minister. She beat her rival, former Finance Minister Rishi Sunak, by 81,326 votes to 60,399 after weeks of an internal leadership contest sparked by Boris Johnson's resignation back in July. Truss is set to become the country's fourth leader in just 6 years and only the third female Prime Minister of the country, following Theresa May and Margaret Thatcher. Soon after the results were announced, Truss vowed to deliver a bold plan to cut taxes and grow the country's economy. So what are the economic challenges that she's going to face? What are the factors that helped her win? Also, how hopeful are the people of Britain now of Liz Truss fixing the enormous crisis the country is currently reeling under? That and much more in this edition of Perspective today, with an illustrious panel of experts joining me on the program. So let me begin by introducing them to you. With me in the studio is former Ambassador Mr. Jitendranath Mishra. Ambassador, thank you for your time. Welcome to Sunset TV. And joining us virtually is Ms. Elizabeth Braw, Resident Fellow, American Enterprise Institute, London, and Professor Harshvi Pant, Vice President, Studies and Foreign Policy, ORF. Thank you to both my guests for joining us virtually and, sharing. And I'll ask you now to, of course, share your reactions on the results about the UK Prime Minister. Ms. Braw, let me begin with you. How do you look at the election results now that Liz Truss has won the UK Prime Minister's race? Is it on the expected lines? And what, according to you, are the factors that helped Truss actually gain edge over Rishi Sunak?
It's a completely expected result. The polling of Conservative Party members, and we should remember the Conservative Party doesn't have very many members, between 150,000 and 200,000. So if you are one of those 200,000, 150,000, you have an enormous say in how the world is governed. It's incredible, really, that they get to choose the party leader. Well, they should get to choose a party leader, but as a result, the prime minister in these internal elections. Anyway, so they were heavily in favor of Liz Truss the moment the contest boiled down to two candidates. And the reasons for that is that she has essentially been campaigning for the leadership for a long time, so building up her credentials with the Conservative base by styling her herself very much in the image of Margaret Thatcher, taking a very strong ideological stance. And of course, in recent months, she has been strengthened by the fact that she has been Foreign Secretary. And so many of the issues of the day have been of a foreign policy nature, including, of course, the war in Ukraine. Rishi Sunak is less ideological. He's seen as more of a globalist, and actually it was to his detriment when it was discovered that he had a US green card for a long time. That was seen as him not being committed enough to the UK, whereas I think 10 years ago that would have been seen as an asset, having lived in different countries around the world. It was also to his detriment that his wife was discovered to have paid overseas taxes, meaning she hadn't been paying UK taxes for her overseas earnings, which are substantial. Now that's completely legal, but that was seen as yet again an example of him not being patriotic enough. Another reason for Liz Truss's win is that Rishi Sunak did worse than expected as a public speaker. He was seen as originally as being a better public speaker, better communicator, whereas Liz Truss is not a particularly skilled communicator, but he didn't manage to capitalize on that, and in fact put in a pretty disappointing performance as a public speaker, as a communicator during this contest.
Okay. What going forward are going to be some of the challenges is something that I'll come back to you, Ms. Braw, and understand. And also the fact which is important for the Conservative Party is that going forward, is she going to be an election winner for the party? Something that Boris Johnson was an asset for the party. What the future prospects look like for Liz Truss now in a year and a half that Britain goes to elections. That will build up in the discussion. But let me go across to Professor Pant and get in his perspective on the factors you listed about what worked for Liz Truss and some of the controversies that, perhaps could have been a disadvantage for Rishi Sunak. But Professor Pant, do you think were only these controversies that perhaps helped Liz Truss gain an edge over Rishi Sunak? Because a lot of analysts say that given the economic challenges that the UK is currently reeling under, someone with an economic background, someone who's been the chancellor of the country, could perhaps have been a bigger bet. Is the UK not ready for, for a prime minister of colour? Could that also be one of the factors?
Well, I think, Tina, it may have played some kind of an, that there may have been some kind of an undercurrent to that effect. But look, essentially, what Elizabeth pointed out are very important factors. And also, one may add that Rishi Sunak was the chancellor under Boris Johnson. And at the moment, the economic crisis that Britain is facing is once in a lifetime crisis. The costs of the cost of living is rising by the day. You have energy inflation, food inflation, the idea that going down in a few months, inflation can touch record high, even go beyond present day 10% to 18. Some are predicting 23%. I mean, these are staggering numbers, and people are hurting. Now, what I think Rishi Sunak's economic message was that, look, I'm not going to cut taxes because I want to be a responsible economic decision maker. Now, that message perhaps did not go down, was not very well communicated, because at the end of the day, people felt that he was out of touch with their sentiment. At least the Conservative Party base that voted in this election. They felt that what Liz Truss was offering was a traditional conservative manifesto of tax cuts and economic growth, whereas Rishi Sunak, who had been a chancellor very closely associated with the pandemic era restrictions and lockdowns, was not really in sync with the sentiment where people really want some help from the state. And he was saying that, look, I'm willing to help, but let me get the finances right. And I don't think people in Britain at this particular point want to hear a technical argument, at least the Conservative Party base, because they feel that they are hurting and they need state support. Now, Liz Truss has certainly come out and said that she would do, within a week, she'll come out with a major intervention. And there are challenges, and we can discuss them later. But I think when it comes to political messaging, Rishi Sunak's message was, happened to happen at a wrong time. In fact, in a different era, in a different time zone, perhaps he would have come out as the smarter of the two, as a better, as a better manager of British finances. But at this particular moment in British economic troubles, he came across as someone who was out of sync with people's aspirations. And I think that for a large part of the Conservative base was certainly that prevented him from occupying the top post, apart from all the other factors that Elizabeth was mentioning before. That it was also a leadership contest in which initially he started off, someone who was fresh, but ultimately ended up not communicating that message that he was carrying very well. But also at the let us also remember that majority of the MPs voted for him. They supported Rishi Sunak. So parliamentary majority was with Rishi Sunak. Conservative Party majority has decided to vote in favor of Liz Truss. And if the opinion polls are to be believed, Rishi Sunak would have done better as a pan-Britain figure if elections were held today or in the last few months. So I think there is still that question of which Tina, you had raised earlier, whether whether Ms. Truss is electable as a prime minister of a nation. So she has certainly proved today that she is the darling of the Conservative base, but whether she can rise up as a national figure, that I think is a question that she's yet to answer.
Absolutely. Ambassador, what is your take on how things have happened in Britain? Rishi Sunak did start off on a good note, on a positive note, as both our earlier speakers have said, and also the fact that in India there was this sentiment that someone of an Indian origin could perhaps emerge to be the top at the top post in the United Kingdom, and that is something that led to this discussion on and the importance of the UK elections this time. That has, of course, not happened. But this aspect, that given the economic scenario in Britain, the kind of challenges that the new Prime Minister is now going to face, she has to swing into action as soon as possible, given the cost of living crisis, given the record inflation. So what are the kind of expectations now that you see in the UK? Because it's an important partner for India as well.
Yes, thank you very much, Tina, for inviting me to the show. First, about India. I think we should stay very quiet and not comment on British internal politics at all. So this was in fact said by the official spokesman the other day to a question. It's an internal matter. For us, it doesn't matter. I will come to the relationship a little later. But, could Rishi Sunak have done a flip-flop in terms of what we heard from Elizabeth Braw and Professor Pant, that that Liz Truss captured the public mood at the base of the party. Ordinary people, much better than Sunak. Look, we've had this pandemic, we've had a very tough time, and we need to lower taxes and we need to get on and enjoy a better life in these hard times. So that was the message that she got across. Now, she is not known to be a great communicator. It's one of the supreme ironies that he failed to communicate at the crunch time. And she perhaps did better than him, though she is not known to be a great communicator. As far as race is concerned, I'm not so sure, but perhaps Britain is not ready, if you look at it statistically, for a Prime Minister of colour, going back to your question, directed to Professor Pant.
Yes, that is something we've seen in the United States. We have seen history happening. Yes. This time, everyone was hoping a similar situation would have happened in the UK, and that unfortunately has not happened.
Perhaps not, because, but then, as we say, also it's about class, not just race. Sunak is very upper class, and is perceived to be very upper class, very well educated, and that sort of thing. Now, these, the base of the party that voted for her was at the very base, it was below. If you look at members of parliament, as we heard, and others, they voted for Sunak. In fact, the YouGov poll the other day said that Liz Truss is an awful leader, according to most of the people who were polled. So I'm a little bit baffled in a way that she won this. I'm not baffled, but it's a paradox, rather, to put it in a better perspective, because only the party members voted for. If it was a general election, he is a much more of an internationalist and more acceptable to a broader spectrum of the populace of the UK. So therefore, he might have won it even now. And he still has a lot of support within the party, but not at the base. But as far as our relationship with the UK is concerned, I'll come to that when you ask me later, it doesn't really matter.
Absolutely, you're right. Whoever becomes the Prime Minister, the larger ambit of bilateral relations are not affected. But the fact that if somebody of the Indian origin is to become the Prime Minister of a country, is that an asset or is it even more challenging? How do you look at it?
Well, it can be an asset for Britain because Britain, first of all, punches far above its weight internationally. And within the British system, British Indians punch far above their weight. I have got some statistics, I can show them to you, but their contribution to the GDP is something like 6%. 1.8% of the population contributes 6 to 7% of that country's GDP. For God's sake, you cannot wish away British Indians. They don't make noise like British Pakistanis on Kashmir and throwing tomatoes at the Indian High Commission and creating a ruckus out there. They don't do that kind of thing. They are quiet, they are better educated, they are solid, they are hardworking, and they are capable. So they are a great asset. And if there is a British Indian origin Prime Minister, you will be able to rally the support of the ethnic Indians, perhaps even the Pakistanis and Bangladeshis. I don't know, perhaps. Because they do cooperate on issues, because all politics is local at the end of the day. It's not about India and Pakistan out there. It's about your food and your bread and your drinks and that kind of thing. So they it might coalesce into a larger support for Rishi Sunak within the community. But then the numbers are not significant at the same time. But I would still say that he has a lot of goodwill. And the big question for me is, politically, did he go wrong in not doing a cynical flip-flop, as politicians would normally do in a situation like this, to come as a great savior? He stuck to his basics and he was truthful and he paid the price.
Okay, so now that of course is beyond question. Now the challenge is for Liz Truss to live up to the promises that she has made in the run-up to this election. Ms. Braw, as soon as the results were announced, I was listening to some of the common people speaking on their reactions to the results, And several of them happen to speak about the poor state of the economy and how they would have expected Rishi Sunak to perhaps take charge and handle the crisis better. Now that Liz Truss is going to take charge, how do you expect her to, steer the economy, which is currently undergoing a challenge which it has not seen in decades?
That is a massive challenge, and as your previous guest said, Rishi Sunak should have won on the basis of economic literacy alone. But the argument that he put forward, which was that tax cuts would be irresponsible at this moment because we need the government to provide support to the people who are most exposed to the cost of living crisis. That argument was simply not popular. And I think all voters everywhere like to engage in wishful thinking, which is what Liz Truss provided. Initially, she said the answer to the economic crisis is tax cuts, and when it became obvious towards the end of the leadership contest that tax cuts wouldn't be enough, she then added that the government would also support those most exposed, or provide extra support to those most exposed to the cost of living crisis. Well, it's very hard to cut taxes and also increase government expenditure, but that's what she promised, and that's a circle she's going to have to square in these first weeks, and she has to get off to a running start because there are so many challenges. There's the cost of living crisis, there's the wider energy crisis, there is, of course, the Ukraine war, there is China, and of course, the ever-looming climate change. And here we'll see probably the UK having to take a lead in, for example, supporting Pakistan. But that will include money spent out of the taxpayer, out of taxpayers' money again. So it's a really daunting challenge facing her. And I think for her, I understand, I hear from people who have worked with her that she does listen to advice, but it's really important, I think. Well, what we'll see is probably her continuing to make ideologically based statements that are popular with the base, but that will then put the government and the UK is more widely in a difficult position because she won't be able to follow up. And so that will be a very difficult transition for her from sort of essentially campaigning for the Conservative base, which is what she's been doing for years now, to trying to run the whole country and also running a responsible foreign policy and position the UK in the world at this really difficult moment.
Of course, she's promised and she's assured of swift action on each of these challenges that the country is facing. But among the people, what is the kind of popularity or support that Liz Truss enjoys?
Among ordinary UK voters, as one of the other guests noted, she's seen as very ideological. Many people consider her a little bit weird, frankly, and so she's not the sort of vote getter that Boris Johnson was, and he, by the way, remains the most popular person in the Conservative Party, and has said that has hinted that he may stage a comeback. So she has that to worry about as well. And if the next election coming up very soon, in a year's time or so, if that election doesn't go well, that's the end of Liz Truss as Conservative Party leader and Prime Minister. So she could turn out to be very short-lived if she doesn't manage all these crises that are on her plate now to manage, if she doesn't manage them and try to solve them extremely quickly, because only by demonstrating capability she has a chance of surviving and winning the next election. She's not going to win it on personality and communication skills alone.
Absolutely. And for that, she has very little time, Professor Pant. The fact that whether she has that, capability to win elections, something that Boris Johnson had, and whether Liz Truss going forward can she lead the Conservative Party to a victory that Boris Johnson had, is the larger question. And this is where perhaps I think the Labour Party feels quite confident. They now think that beating Rishi Sunak could have been quite difficult. But now that Liz Truss is there on the picture, she's taking charge, it's going to be quite easy for them.
Indeed, it seems, it's often said that you campaign in poetry and you govern in prose, right? So I think the campaign season is over. Now is the time to deliver and govern. And what Boris Johnson has done is something very, very, is something quite startling, actually. What he has done is he has made the brand Conservative associated with malgovernance. And I think he has tainted the brand. And that is, I think, very challenge. It's going to be a huge challenge for any, would have been a huge challenge for any of his successors. But for Liz Truss, it's going to be an even difficult challenge because she has to do two things. She has to unite the the Tories first, the Conservative Party that is badly divided, as we have seen. It has been a bruising campaign between her and Rishi Sunak, and Rishi Sunak basically also said that basically accused her of being economically irresponsible, and a number of issues. For example, we have seen the parliamentary support for Rishi Sunak not going in favor of Liz Truss. Liz Truss, therefore, reaching out to the base, therefore taking an ideological position, a range of ideological positions, which she might find very difficult to now operationalize. And also, she has to govern a nation that I think is seeking governance. Boris Johnson's, he resigned in July, and since then there has been this void in governance in Britain. So much is happening. There is an economic crisis. There are strike actions by various unions that is going on. It has been a terrible summer in Britain. And yet it seems at this particular moment that no one has been in charge. We have had reports about Johnson vacationing, etc., etc. So there is a challenge to build brand Conservative Party, that brand that I think has gone down the flames, and therefore Labour Party feels that they have a chance after years of being in the wilderness. For once, they see something happening, and they I think would be very happy with Liz Truss's appointment at the moment. But we may also be underestimating her at this point, because it is also when you put someone in a position like this, that person can either outperform themselves or can burn out in flames. So I think we have to wait and watch what she does. But clearly, the pressures on her, of uniting the party, of bringing the party together, and working towards the goals that I think she has set out for herself, and her agenda, and giving a sense of leadership to a nation in crisis. They are huge challenges. And among all the challenges, other economic challenges, etc., cultural challenges, and of course the challenge which is looming also. We hear that the Queen is not very well, so who knows what might happen very soon in Britain in terms of the constitutional architecture. So the challenges are huge, and she's there at the moment. She has the baton in her own hands, so she has to prove herself. The challenges, both from a political party perspective as well as from a national governance perspective, she will have to manage now. She can't pass the buck anymore, and I think the time only time will tell whether she's able to resolve some of these challenges. But the challenges are indeed huge.
Absolutely, the challenges, Ambassador, are immense, and that's why a lot of analysts have said that there is going to be no honeymoon period for the next Prime Minister of the UK, given the domestic challenges and the crisis internationally that's building as well. But if we look at it from the larger India-UK ambit, our relations have only gone from good to better in the last few decades or so. Perhaps our relationship has seen newer heights. But with the new Prime Minister now taking charge, and she's going to be surrounded by a lot of domestic challenges, what is the kind of boost that you see to the India-UK relationship, particularly to some of these sticking points that continue to persist between our relationships?
Thank you very much. That's a very good question. I'm comfortable answering for sure. But first, we didn't mention the fact that Liz Truss is female. That's significant, because a lot of primary members would have been also women. So there is also a gender issue here, supporting a person of the same gender. And secondly, she dresses and tries to appear like Margaret Thatcher. Her politics is ideological, very much in the fashion of Margaret Thatcher. Low taxes, more spending, that kind of thing. But she could turn out to be, as we just heard, a crisis prime minister. We don't know. So, but she's trying to appear, she dresses very well. So that's significant. That, in this phase, but not in the next phase. We'll have to see what happens. Well, India-UK relations are full of paradoxes. They've always been very complicated. And I don't think they are better or worse, or they will be better or worse than what they have been. Until the fundamental structural problems in the relationship, I don't want to be pessimistic, but realistic, hopefully, are resolved. What are these paradoxes? Now, it's astonishing, and we must comment on it. The External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, speaking to the Atlantic Council, quotes the figure of the economist Utsa Patnaik, $45 trillion of reparations in the paper that she published recently at Princeton University. And that has shaken up a lot of people. Dr. Shashi Tharoor has given a lot of talks about inglorious empire. And that kind of crescendo of debate about the grievances of the past, which Indians kept under wraps for all these decades, with India becoming more confident, I think that's going to become prominent. And no less than Dr. Jaishankar, I'm astonished, it's very interesting. He said, it's predatory, British rule was predatory and 2 centuries of humiliation, to quote him precisely at the Atlantic Council. He did not agree or disagree with these figures, but he said these are her figures. And he's very much on board. Now, if that is coming from the Minister of External Affairs of India, that becomes some kind of policy in the making, if not actual policy. It's a signal to the British that we cannot take it any longer. We'll smoke you out of your denial of the depredations of British colonial rule in India. But the British Prime Ministers, they live in a world that is very different. YouGov polls, the people think the empire was very good, 58% a few years ago. And you had Gordon Brown saying good things. You had Prime Minister David Cameron in India saying at Jallianwala Bagh, he said, well, I think it was on the whole beneficial. He said that in India and he got away with it. So now Indians, I think we have been altruistic and very nice to Britain, but it's about time we become real, because we have some attributes of hard power which we can wield and manipulate in our favor. You had David Cameron made 3 or 4 visits to India before Prime Minister Modi went to the UK in 2015. The tables are turning, but let's not overplay it, because Britain is still $48,000 per capita GDP. We are $20,000.
But the fact that, we just overtook the UK to become the 5th
we have
largest
overtaken
economy.
the UK.
Absolutely.
So I put it structurally, and as far as specifics, I can talk about the paradoxes, but I'll stop here. If there's another round, I'll talk about it.
Absolutely. So let's hope that, for now, Liz Truss is going to be the Prime Minister. And as we've seen, there have been quite a number of positives in the India-UK relationship. Let's hope that with her at the helm as well, India-UK relationships soar higher and higher. And, we see newer opportunities in each other's countries, which is going to be beneficial for our people on both sides. So that having been said, I'll have to wind up the program. Thank you, Ms. Bro, Professor Pant and Ambassador, for joining us on this edition of Perspective, sharing your thoughts with us and our viewers. Absolute pleasure to hear all 3 of you on the India-UK relationship and, the Prime Ministerial contest that has just taken place in the UK, wherein Liz Truss has beat Rishi Sunak to emerge as the country's Prime Minister. She will be officially taking over in a day or 2, and in another one, and if I'm not wrong, Ambassador, a year and a half perhaps, wherein the UK will face fresh elections. So let's see how it pans out in the UK, with whom India enjoys good relationships, and we're hopeful that this is going to only improve further and reach newer heights. That's it from us on this edition of Perspective today. Thank you to you viewers as well for your time. I'll see you same time tomorrow now with another topic and a different set of panelists. Until then, take care of yourselves and keep watching Sunset TV.